Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who just wrapped up 2 days of meetings in Pyongyang, maintained his visits produced results, but said sanctions would remain for now. Joining me from Clemson, South Carolina, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, just back from a trip, so we're glad to have you here. If we could start with North Korea, there's obvious improvement in relations, because you have Kim Jong-un used to say that President Trump was a doter. Now he's actually engaging on policy, but it probably doesn't surprise you that much that the North Koreans issued this statement yesterday saying that the meeting was regrettable, saying they were robber-like, and really pouring cold water on it. What do you think of it?
I see China's hands all over this. We're in a fight with China. We buy $500 billion worth of goods from the Chinese. They buy $100 billion from us. They cheat, and President Trump wants to change the economic relationship with China. So if I were President Trump, I would not let China use North Korea to back me off of the trade dispute. We got more bullets than they do when it comes to trade. We sell them $100 billion. They sell us $500 billion. We can hurt them more than they'll hurt us. And all we're looking for is for them to stop cheating when it comes to trade. There's no doubt in my mind that it's the Chinese pulling the North Koreans back. And to our North Korean friends, can't say the word friend yet. You asked Pompeo, did he sleep well? If you knew what I knew about what we could do to the leadership of North Korea, you wouldn't sleep very well.
I actually really enjoyed reading about that exchange where the North Korean general's asking Mike Pompeo twice, like, surely you couldn't have slept well last night, and our Secretary of State said, oh, I slept just fine. Meanwhile, President Trump will meet one-on-one with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki next Monday. Bloomberg reports the Kremlin is working with the U.S. to have a deal that the president will accept. They say Putin has agreed in principle to U.S. and Israeli demands that Iranian-backed forces in southern Syria be kept away from Israel's border, replaced with troops loyal to the government in Damascus. That's according to 2 Kremlin advisors. Would you recommend the president agree to that deal?
Given Russia's behavior, absolutely not. Russia was supposed to make sure that Assad had no chemical weapons. The last thing you can rely upon is the Russians to take care of American and Israeli interests. There's a deal to be had in Syria. Our troops in northeastern Syria, working with the Syrian Democratic Forces, Arabs and Kurds, have demolished ISIS, and if we stay there, we have about 2,000 troops, ISIS won't come back. If we stay in northeastern Syria, Iran can't march from Tehran to Beirut. I don't trust the Russians to implement any agreement when it comes to the Iranians, but there is a way to break Iran away from Russia away from Iran, but no way can be achieved without us staying there. Our presence in northeastern Syria is an insurance policy against Assad taking over Syria and ISIS coming back and the Iranians owning the whole region.
How do you balance the cooperation that we need with Russia right now on some things with the concerns that we have with Russia on many other fronts? And how would you recommend President Trump approach that meeting next Monday in Helsinki? It will be his first one-on-one with Putin.
Well, first, when Putin denies that he was involved in our election in 2016, reject the denial. Challenge him. Don't let him deny the obvious. They're still trying to disrupt the 2018 election cycle. When it comes to Syria, we need to be partnering with Turkey to make sure that we can maintain a presence in northeastern Syria. At the end of the day, Iran is a weak economy. They got problems in their own backyard. What we need to do is partner with Turkey and Russia and break Iran away. Iran has a different reason for being in Syria than most everybody else. Israel cannot tolerate Hezbollah and Iranian presence in Syria. If you leave Assad in power, the Arabs never will accept him, nor will the Syrian people. There's a way to get Russia pulled away from Iran, but we've got to have a presence in Iraq and Syria to be successful. In 2007, we lost 900 soldiers fighting in Iraq. In the last 3.5 years, we've lost 14. President Trump has done a good job of destroying ISIS and countering Iran. Our soldiers in Iraq and Syria are insurance policies against Iran domination and the rise of ISIS. If we keep this configuration in place, we've got some leverage regarding Russia and Iran.
You mentioned Turkey. I wanted to ask you about that. You were just on a trip where you spoke to President Erdogan. He's going to be inaugurated for, I think, 4th term tomorrow. And while Turkey has been somewhat helpful in Syria, as you mentioned, and Ambassador Hutchison just said, are you concerned that Turkey is an ally adrift, and is there a strategy to get them back on track?
Yes, they're definitely an ally adrift, but there's a new chapter in Turkish history. Erdogan won big, and he's going to have a long time to serve in Turkey, and we need to come to grips with that. We need to push them when it comes to the way they treat the press and some human rights abuses. They have Americans in captivity for no good reason. But having said that, we need to assure Turkey that the Kurdish forces we've partnered with in Syria will not present a threat to Turkey. That's a legitimate concern. Turkey has no interest in Iran dominating Damascus. At the end of the day, their economy is better off hooked up with us versus Russia and Iran. They are a NATO ally. So I came away from my meeting somewhat encouraged that we can start over with President Erdogan in a win-win fashion, securing the northeastern part of Syria in a fashion acceptable to Turkey, and they can be a better ally when it comes to pushing back against Iran and ISIS.
Did you talk to President Erdogan about this idea that they would want to buy an S-400 anti-aircraft system?
Yes.
And do you think that he wants to go forward with it? And if he does, will the Congress vote to put sanctions on Turkey, since that's allowed under the Russian Sanctions Act?
We're not going to sell Turkey the F-35, our most advanced fighter, and allow them to buy the most advanced Soviet anti-aircraft system. It will just be a matter of time before the S-400 would be used in a fashion to undermine the F-35. They have to pick. I would like them to buy the Patriot missile battery made by the United States and our partners. They are a NATO partner. They need to release Pastor Brunson, who's been held, in my view, way too long, very much illegally. But you got to remember that President Erdogan was under siege 2 years ago. There was an armed coup. I left that meeting believing that we can do business with Erdogan. You can't have the S-400. We'll find a substitute for that. If you release the prisoners that are caught up in the coup, that helps us enormously. There's a win-win situation in northeastern Syria. I think Turkey understands their future is better with the West economically, and I'd like to do a free trade agreement one day with Turkey when they get their house into order, and that would neuter Russia and Iran's influence vis-a-vis Turkey better than anything I could think of.
I wanted to bring up Pastor Andrew Brunson. I think we have a photo of him here. He's been held for 2 years. This is of great concern to the president and to the vice president. Did you get any indication that he'll be able to come home soon?
I met with him. Here's what was interesting. President Erdogan met with Senator Shaheen and myself. The next day, he let us go see Pastor Brunson, who's doing well physically, but has been in jail now way too long. He lived in Turkey for 24 years. He has nothing to do with the coup when it comes to what happened in 2016. He got caught up in a net, and he is not a threat to the people of Turkey. That is a defining issue between us and Turkey. But I'm encouraged. I don't believe he would let us go see Pastor Brunson if they were not looking for a way to end this. And they have some other embassy personnel in Turkish prison, and we need to get this issue behind us. I left Turkey thinking that after the Erdogan's election, we got a chance to do business with them better than in the past, and I hope we'll take it, because we need Turkey, and they need us.
Sounds like a worthwhile trip. Let me ask you one last question, back on domestic policy. The timing of a Supreme Court nomination seems to not be better for Republicans. You're on the Judiciary Committee. You've been around before for Supreme Court nominations. How much different might this one be, and do you feel confident that the Republicans will be able to confirm one of President Trump's nominees before the midterms?
I think I got 2 words, and I heard Supreme Court and confidence. So we got a technical problem, but here's my answer. Republicans are holding 4 lottery tickets, and all of them are winners. If you're a conservative Republican, the 4 people named, particularly Thomas Heidemann, I'm glad he's on the list, are all winners, and every Republican should embrace these picks. Here's the truth. Donald Trump could nominate George Washington or John Marshall, and they couldn't get through. Maybe a handful of Democrats will vote for a Trump pick because they have to politically. I've never seen it this dysfunctional. There's nobody that President Trump could nominate from a conservative bent that will get many Democratic votes. But this is a nightmare for red state Democrats to oppose a highly qualified nominee. And all 4 of these people are highly qualified, been on the court, know what they're doing, mainstream judges. So red state Democrats are going to have a very hard decision. And I hope every Republican will rally behind these picks because they're all outstanding.
All right, Senator Graham, thank you for reading my mind since you couldn't hear me, and for joining us today. It's always good to talk to you, sir.
Thank you.
Up next, what could a conservative replacement for Justice Kennedy mean for Roe v. Wade? Elise Hogue, president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, joins us when we come back. The president is set to announce his nominee for the Supreme Court Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and much of the focus has been on how a new justice could join with the High Court's conservative bloc to overrule the court's Roe v. Wade decision. Joining me now is Elise Hogue. She's president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, an organization working to keep abortion legal and accessible. Thank you for being here with me. Take a listen to Leonard Leo last week on Fox News Sunday. He's currently on leave from the Federalist Society, and he put together the Supreme Court list for President Trump.
I don't think at the end of the day it's about Roe v. Wade. It's about having judges on the court who are going to interpret the Constitution the way it's written. And part of interpreting the Constitution is taking into account major precedents, and that's going to happen.
Well, these conservatives say the concern about Roe v. Wade is more of a scare tactic than reality. How do you see it?
We take the president at his word. He's the president of the United States, and he is certainly the first major party nominee who went on to be president to put a litmus test on Supreme Court justices, and that was to actually overturn Roe v. Wade. So we believe it. He's got a vice president who committed to, row on the ash heap of history. So we think that's the mindset that many Americans are actually going into this with, because it was such a vocal talking point for him. And then we also know that the backpedaling that's happening now from people who have long been critics of Roe v. Wade is partially because they know what we know, which is most American people actually, regardless of how they feel personally about abortion, believe that legal access is core to our country's freedom.
In fact, I have some polls, and I think that we could pull them up here. Public opinion certainly has shifted since 1973. It's been 45 years. And 67% of Americans say they do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned, though there is some variation by degrees. In another poll, 50% say it should be legal under certain circumstances, 18% say it should not be legal at all. So with 68% of people saying some or no, all restrictions or some restrictions, how do you plan to go forward? And is it a situation where you might let the states decide if there is this public opinion change?
Yeah, thank you, Dana. I'm from Texas, and so I'm very familiar with what happens when the state decides. It's similar to other freedoms and protections of people we've seen in this country. Without a federal guideline that affirms the fact that Roe should be legal, many states already have decided that abortion should be criminalized. In fact, there are states with laws on the books right now that would make abortion a criminal act the minute Roe falls, and that makes women and doctors criminals. And so we think that the federal protection is necessary. We also know that that number of people who say, in some circumstances, of course, right? It's a complicated issue. But when you probe that a little bit further, what we find is that people are very, very uncomfortable sitting in judgment. Every individual has a story, and that most people are compassionate and recognize that allowing people to make their own decisions about their families is the compassionate and healthy choice.
So back to the Supreme Court nomination. So I take your point that what President Trump said in the campaign and then what he says now is that he's not going to ask the people that he's interviewed for this possible position. But I want you to listen to two recent Supreme Court nominees and how they answered questions in Senate hearings about Roe v. Wade.
Can you tell me whether Roe was decided correctly?
Senator, again, I would tell you that Roe versus Wade, decided in 1973, is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. It has been reaffirmed.
In your opinion, is Roe settled law?
The court's decision in Planned Parenthood versus Casey reaffirmed the core holding of Roe. That is the precedent of the court and settled in terms of the holding of the court.
So those two seem very similar to me. They're different from the ideological perspective. And if the new nominee actually were to answer it in that way, would that be satisfactory to you?
Because President Trump changed the rules of the game when he put a litmus test on the Supreme Court nominee, we think that we need an affirmative declaration, right? We need, and I think even Susan Collins said this when she said she needs to see a nominee demonstrate their commitment to upholding Roe versus Wade and keeping abortion legal.
But even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in her hearing